Hello, my name is Teresa Towie, Programs Coordinator for Strategic Applications International. This module will cover community policing strategies that can be implemented in PL 280 jurisdictions. This module will cover key community policing strategies and how to implement them in order to enhance responsiveness to the most dire and frequently occurring crimes in PL 280 jurisdictions. The learning objectives are as follows. The participant will have a basic understanding of the philosophy behind community policing and benefits and challenges of community policing. The participant will learn about potential partners for tribal community policing and how to strengthen and create new partnerships. And lastly, the participant will learn effective tribal community policing strategies and how to implement them. Now, please take a few seconds to read through these cartoons, and I'll meet you on slide 5. In the Promising Practices in Tribal Community Policing document, the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, known as the COPS Office, defines community policing as a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies which support the systematic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues, such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime. Community policing calls on the police to implement organizational changes that support the proactive prevention of crime and social disorder through partnerships and systematic problem solving. 3 elements of community policing are community partnerships, organizational transformation, and problem solving. The first, community partnerships, involves developing partnerships between non-tribal and tribal law enforcement, tribal organizations, community members, government agencies, and the media. Such partnerships can facilitate collaborative solutions and improve trust between police and the communities they serve. The second element of community policing is organizational transformation. In order to operationalize community policing, changes to organizational structure, policies, and procedures may be needed. Changes might involve including community policing principles in the agency staffing plan, from hiring to evaluations, aligning organizational management systems so that they support community partnerships, and implementing employment strategies that support proactive problem solving. The third element of community policing is problem solving. The problem solving model encourages departments to develop proactive solutions to the underlying conditions contributing to community safety problems. It requires the proactive examination of known problems in order to develop and evaluate effective solutions. This process, commonly known as the SARA model, typically follows 4 steps: scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. It directs resources to the most pressing concerns of both the police and the community, which in turn builds community trust. In order to understand contemporary ideas of tribal community policing, it is helpful to consider the historical changes that policing has undergone. From 1840 to 1920 was called the political era. During the political era, the police were familiar with the neighborhoods they served and they maintained order in them. However, this period was also characterized by abuse of immigrant civil rights and was marked by widespread corruption. The 1920s to 1970 was known as the professional era, during which the police relied heavily on new technology such as radios, 911 emergency telephone systems, and automobile patrols to respond to calls for help from citizens. In this period, police dealt only with crime, and other community problems were seen as the responsibility of other city agencies. The community policing era began in the 1970s and continues today. The community policing era was born out of a recognized need for law enforcement to reestablish ties with citizens. In the 1970s, police departments began to address some of the problems that had developed under the professional era style of policing. The reactive, rapid response to all 911 calls was viewed as a poor use of resources because it allowed too little time for in-depth investigations. In addition, the passive role of citizens had resulted in the loss of police ties with the people. Community policing seeks to incorporate the early community service functions from law enforcement's origins with the Reform era's support of greater professional development through education and training. It attempts to minimize and eliminate some of the historically negative perceptions of police. Community policing places considerable emphasis on police-community relations and actively seeks to engage citizens in partnerships with the police to build safer communities through proactive problem-solving efforts. Tribal law enforcement organizations will need to develop the capacity to better and more effectively utilize a new community policing model. They will need to continually seek out and create opportunities while encouraging people in their organizations to learn new skills. Focusing on institutional changes will create an environment that is committed to learning, growth, and change. Since 2008, the National Criminal Justice Training Center of Fox Valley Technical College has provided tribal community policing training and technical assistance to tribal law enforcement agencies and communities in partnership with the COPS Office of the Department of Justice. The International Association of Chiefs of Police and the COPS Office partnered to produce the publication, Promising Practices in Tribal Community Policing. NCJTC offers core curriculum complemented with a wide variety of on-site training and technical assistance services designed to address the specific needs of tribal law enforcement agencies. Through this program, you can host the Tribal-Oriented Policing Strategies, TOPS, training, a 2-day interactive training designed to strengthen relationships between the community and tribal law enforcement agencies and get back to the basics of community policing. TOPS demonstrates how law enforcement and the community can work together in organized problem-solving teams to address key public safety issues, such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime, by utilizing the community policing philosophy. For additional information on community policing strategies, see these resources put forth by the COPS Office. In order to develop effective community policing strategies, it is important to first understand some of the key challenges of community policing in PL 280 states. The first challenge is staffing. Many tribal law enforcement agencies are seriously understaffed, and some agencies employ both tribal and non-tribal sworn officers because of the difficulty of retaining qualified candidates from tribal populations. Turnover is often high, and sworn staffing levels are further exacerbated by efforts to recruit and hire replacement officers in a timely manner. High turnover results in the need to constantly train new recruits, making it difficult to cultivate community policing experience. Funding can also be a challenge because community policing requires funding to hire, equip, and train officers, and to improve the communications infrastructure to enhance officer and citizen safety in remote locations, and to increase mutual cooperation with non-tribal law enforcement agencies. The fragmented nature of tribal lands can also pose a challenge to community policing. Some tribal lands belonging to the same tribe are separated by many miles of non-tribal lands and pose additional obstacles for developing effective community policing strategies. The Mojave Indian Reservation, for example, is located in 3 states. Each parcel not only poses a problem for tribal law enforcement, but also for the state and local law enforcement agencies that have to patrol the areas and provide unified community policing to their non-tribal communities. A fourth challenge is public trust. The community might view both tribal and non-tribal police as a threat, making it difficult to implement community policing strategies. However, public trust is essential to effective community policing, because community policing requires a cooperation and collaboration between the police and various parts of the community. Sometimes, political, clan, and family relationships influence police practice, which can lead to increased corruption and decreased public trust. Lastly, accountability can be a challenge, because the success of community policing requires an officer to build personal relationships with the community and business leaders, oftentimes reducing the involvement of the police department leadership, which can result in barriers to accountability and evaluation. Community policing also involves increased intimacy between police officers and citizens in neighborhoods. and development of patrol and policing tactics by patrol officers at a neighborhood or community level. All of these characteristics require increased officer use of discretion and empowerment of patrol officers. This list of challenges is not exhaustive. Can you think of additional challenges? In PL 280 states, it is imperative that tribes, state law enforcement, and local law enforcement work together to address public safety issues. Strong community partnerships and the hiring of tribal representatives within the police department increase trust in law enforcement and help create solutions to address community public safety issues through collaborative problem solving. Partnerships with the community are essential to any crime prevention effort because they inspire the confidence of community members to pass along information. When law enforcement establishes strong community partnerships, the community becomes the eyes and ears for law enforcement, and in return, public safety improves as crime rates decline. Important community partners include government agencies, community groups, nonprofit organizations, private businesses, and the media. There are several methods for establishing and strengthening community partnerships. First, monthly community meetings that bring together the tribal police department, representatives from the sheriff's department, and other community members can serve as a platform for the community to share concerns. Additionally, when addressing a specific project or issue, monthly community meetings are essential for building trust between the community and law enforcement and for implementing action steps. A second method is to administer a community safety survey for tribal leadership and community members. Surveys can be designed to collect information about safety concerns, current programs, and future programs. Surveys can be administered at monthly meetings or via mail or email. Trainings can also provide an opportunity for officers to network and to discuss opportunities for enhanced collaboration between the non-tribal and tribal police departments. Deputies can also attend various community meetings and other training sessions held in the community in order to increase acceptance and trust. Partnerships can also be strengthened by hosting cross-trainings and sharing resources. Having joint tribal law enforcement and sheriff's deputy training is critical to build relationships between tribal and non-tribal police departments, which enhances trust and legitimacy between both agencies. When tribal police departments train in the same way that non-tribal police departments do, each agency is on the same page. Lastly, you can implement a resident deputy program and recruit and hire local officers to work in tribal areas. Round Valley implemented a resident deputy program that solicited applications from deputies in the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office and external applicants. Community members and tribal leaders were able to meet with the applicants. The chosen applicants lived in Round Valley 4 days a week, which enabled them to get to know the community. Effective community policing also requires the acquisition of grants and funding to implement these strategies, and monitoring and evaluation to document outcomes and best practices to guide further initiatives. Despite the challenges, there are numerous effective community policing strategies that can be achieved through community and staff engagement. Several ways to engage the community are: meet with residents in jurisdiction and administer surveys about satisfaction with police services. Partner with other agencies to host parent or grandparent forums around certain issues, such as drug use among youth. Organize events in partnership with local schools. Develop a platform for residents to share non-emergency information and report possible illicit behavior. Increase collaboration between tribal law enforcement and local sheriff's departments through formal agreements and sharing resources and information. And develop interagency partnerships around certain issues, such as domestic violence and child abuse. To engage staff, you can train officers on community policing to ensure that they understand the philosophy and their tasks. Solicit officer feedback and input regarding the planning and implementation of community policing initiatives. Next, we'll discuss some examples of successful community policing strategies. Next, we'll discuss some specific examples of community policing strategies in PL 280 states. In order to strengthen community partnerships, Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, Minnesota, increased awareness about gangs by holding community meetings, implemented a neighborhood watch program, and increased networking between the tribal police department and the county police department. In order to address the issue of alcohol and substance abuse, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, Minnesota, formed a public health emergency response team, which included training and a comprehensive plan at all levels, and hired a drug coordinator to do outreach. In order to address the issue of gangs, Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, Wisconsin hired a gang specialist to work in the community, provided alternative activities for youth, which include cops participating in youth sports, water activities, and family days, and implemented a dress code policy in schools. Additionally, Oneida Tribe of Indians of Wisconsin developed a prevention and education strategy to address the issue of gangs. In order to address the issue of youth misbehavior, Coquille Indian Tribe of Oregon created a referral process for delinquent behavior, whereby youth work with tribal service providers, and it created opportunities for officers to become more involved with youth. Now we will hear from Bill Denke, Chief of Police of the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation. Bill Denke has been the chief of the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation in San Diego County since 2005. Prior to his appointment as chief of police, he spent more than 10 years grappling with tribal justice issues that are unique to California for the tribe. The Sequan Tribal Police Department provides safety for all tribal residents and visitors. The department's police officers enforce both tribal ordinances and applicable federal laws on the reservation, and work closely with other enforcement agencies to maintain a safe environment on the Sequan Reservation. The police department has a written agreement with the U.S. Department of Interior, which cross-deputizes Sequan's police officers as federal law enforcement officers. The agreement enables them to better serve the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation by giving statutory criminal authority to Sequan's police officers over Native and non-Native people alike.
My name is Bill Denke, Chief of Police for the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation in San Diego County. Honored to be on the call here today, to kind of discuss some of the community and policing initiatives our department's been a part of the last decade or so, and kind of go through some of the organizational transformation over those last 10 to probably 13 years. Talk about some of the strategies that were put into place to help implement some of that change and those initiatives, along with some of the challenges and hurdles. 12 years ago, when I was sworn in as the police chief, really all the police department was doing on the enforcement side was the enforcement of, a pretty simplistic tribal code with primarily traffic codes being enforced with the how would I say this? The goal over several years of working towards enforcement of criminal codes and even entering into deputation agreements, either enforce federal or state laws on the reservation. So over that time period, we worked very closely with tribal leadership on developing a more robust tribal code. At the same time, really trying to develop those partnerships with the county, with the district attorney's office, the sheriff's department, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and over time, we were able to take those relationships to a step kind of where we are now and enter into formal intergovernmental agreements that allowed Sequan's tribal police officers to enforce applicable federal law or state law, have memorandums of understanding with our county district attorney's office to be able to submit state cases directly to the DA's office and not have to go through the sheriff's department or another agency for prosecution, and also special agreements for entering into or being a partner in the countywide interoperable radio communication systems, information sharing, as far as access to local, regional, and state databases. Incidents that just kind of rose to a level of concern is obvious that that trust that this tribal police department in previous years had was kind of getting lost somewhere. So we started, kind of an initiative instead of just, saying, hey, we're restructuring, we're going to come up with some robust solution to fix this. We basically attacked it as like a renewed focus, and it was it was a bit tricky out of the gate because we had some very good, well trained police officers that are very effective in investigating uh, crime. They're very proactive in making arrests. So the last thing we wanted to do was to, temper their spirit on being effective law enforcement officers. So we kind of took this renewed focus look and really borrowed from the president's task force on 21st century policing, and just share with you five areas that we decided to really focus on. One, being patient, uh, and just explain a little bit more of that detail. The officers must always recognize that they're often not seen as welcomed outsiders, but as invading force, especially in small tribal communities. And officers that get frustrated, it's part they're human too, but they, keeping in mind that, when the community sees them on the side of the road by their vehicle or on a street corner in someone's living room, that frustration is not going to help the situation. And we just, trying to instill that community members, uh, when they see that, they're going to feel they're mistreated by the police, the entire justice system, and that just reminding the officers that they have to, consistently strive to show, they're trying to treat people fairly and with respect. Another thing that goes hand in hand with that is officers keeping their cool. Same thing, on the side of the road or in somebody's living room, and not having their buttons pushed. It's something that's very easy to happen when you work in a small community. You know the people, and these officers to realize that, hey, don't wait for the next, radio call there to try and solve that problem, or maybe that personality conflict between that person and the community and the officer. But in the meantime, try to work on a way of getting past some of those differences. Number three, making sure the officers, just reminding them, to be knowledgeable, that ignorance of the law isn't an excuse. Uh, officers should always understand every code or law they're enforcing. That becomes a bit tricky here because we're enforcing tribal law, state law, and federal law. But at the same time, there's an expectation, that they're going to know what they're enforcing, and they need to be able to calmly explain, it to people as they encounter them. Once again, a little tricky because of the three different jurisdictions and also the status of the offender being Indian or non-Indian. Uh, a fourth thing we hit on was just being alert. I mean, this one's kind of common sense. Once again, going back to everything in the news right now with technology being used against officers, as far as, from surveillance cameras, body-worn cameras, members of the public filming officers, making sure that, that these officers, always have another set of eyes on them. A video camera can be turned on halfway through an incident. It's not going to capture the whole incident yet. That's what's going to be released to the media. That's what's going to end up, in elected leadership's lap. Uh, so really just assuming all the time that, hey, from the second you get out of your car, the second you start talking to somebody, treat people like you're being recorded. And it's, and making sure the officers know, as long as they're remaining calm and remaining professional, these videos aren't going to do nothing but help exonerate any type of, false claim. And fifth and lastly, is know your community. Officers of patrol communities composed of folks who are different from them by race or culture. Here we go back to a tribal community. If you have non-Indian officers working in a tribal community, the officers have to be willing to learn the culture of, and understand that, they're not soldiers. They shouldn't always be perceived as an enforcer, but more of a problem solver. Of, and just working hard to develop that rapport with the community and carrying out their duties. So what we really did was I put together like a one-page memo that went to all the officers. We hit on these issues and got into how we could work together as a team to kind of to make this transformation. And then I met with each officer individually, and really tailored it to that officer, knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are. But we've had absolute, I think, knock on wood, the last 12 months, I actually rolled this out 12, 16 months ago. Uh, it's just amazing. Something as small as what I just spoke about, and working with the officers individually, the change, and I don't think that change should be uh, weighted on, or it should be defined as less complaints, but taking that set of data as far as the complaints going down, and looking, then going back and seeing what their arrest stats are, what they're doing in the community. And very happy to sit here today and say, hey, our arrest, our proactive law enforcement has actually been up in the last 12 plus months, and our complaints have been down. But making sure we have officers at every community event we possibly can staff, and making sure those officers aren't there as like an enforcement detail, but as truly a community outreach detail. So, as far as hurdles going through this, one thing that really gets overlooked uh, is the actual individual officer. I think when we talk about hurdles, we talk about the relationship with the elected leaders, the outspoken community leaders, the ones that are critical. But one thing we really tried to pay attention to was the individual officers' capabilities, and not, like I said a couple minutes ago, not dampening their spirit, because it's easy to come out of the gate and just say, hey, look, we're going to back off this type of enforcement. We're going to really back off traffic enforcement unless it's egregious, and do things, for a quick fix to stop the complaints. But to actually get the officers buy-in, hey, you can still go out there and do your job. You can still, not only be effective without the complaints, you can actually be more effective. And I think our officers have seen, some community members maybe in the past they haven't been able to work with real closely, to actually developing a relationship, and using that relationship, leveraging it to even get information to help them solve other crimes that are maybe happening in their area. So that's definitely one hurdle. And I think another big hurdle is, and going back to what's in the news all the time, is we hear as law enforcement leadership lately that, hey, we need to get the narrative back. We're letting the media and other folks create this narrative, or maybe false narrative. And it's, I understand when I hear colleagues say that. I understand where they're coming from, but I think it's real important to remember that it's not about owning the narrative. It's about being a part of the narrative, and not waiting for that use of force incident to define your agency or your jurisdiction. It's about being part of that narrative. It's about being transparent now, not about let's be transparent once there's an incident, and now we have to show that, we'll show our videos, we'll show our investigation. But just operating transparently in everything you do, I think goes a long ways. And I think without doing that, you're creating your own hurdle, because by trying to undo those issues after a major incident, it's pretty damaging already at that point. And it's really tough to get things back on track. And then you really are put in a place where you're just a place of defense, where you're trying to just take the narrative back. We've also been part of some really neat community and policing projects. One we like is we do with our partners, specifically the Sheriff's Department during the holiday season. The Sheriff's Department came up with this a few years back. It's their Holiday Watch program, where really, they put traffic signs up in areas where they know they're having a lot of vehicle break-ins because of near shopping malls, near areas where vehicles are going to be parked for long periods of time, and maybe they have gifts in them, things during the holidays, and do directed patrols. So what you're doing is you're out there making a ton of vehicle stops, but where it comes in as far as the whole community-oriented policing component of it, you're not just trying to mitigate or try to solve the crime and trying to find stolen property in the cars. If you're stopping somebody for going a few miles per hour the speed limit or rolling through a stop sign, it's that's not the impetus for the stop. So if everything's fine on the stop other than that minor traffic collision, you turn it into an educational experience for the person. You're explaining that, hey, we're out here in force right now. We're going to be out here in force through January 1st part of this program. Drive safely, have a nice day. And it's something officers like to do. It definitely, you're taking a proactive stance as far as trying to mitigate those burglaries, but at the same time, you're making people feel like, hey, cops aren't just out here to write tickets or bust us. We're getting a break right now. So uh, something we've really enjoyed doing the last few holiday seasons, and look forward to that in the future.
To conclude, PL 280 poses significant challenges to community policing, but when police and communities collaborate, they more effectively address underlying issues, change negative behavioral patterns, and allocate resources. This includes developing a strong working relationship between state police, tribal police, and sheriff's departments. Community policing begins with a commitment to building trust and mutual respect between communities and you.